You may not realize it, but the life you're currently living might not be the one that's truly meant for you. There's a strange, quiet discomfort that grows when you're tuned into a version of reality that doesn't quite fit. Everything might appear fine from the outside. You may be doing everything right by the world's standards, but inside, something feels off. Like you're playing a role that doesn't quite match your script. Like you're walking a path that someone else laid out, and you've only just realized the scenery isn't yours. This isn't about dissatisfaction in the traditional sense. It's deeper than that. It's subtle. It often shows up as an ache, not for more stuff, but for a different rhythm, a different way of being, a different feeling in your body when you wake up in the morning. Something inside you senses that there's a life where things feel lighter, clearer, more real. And that sense is not wrong. In fact, it might be the most honest thing about your current experience. We grow up being taught that there's only one version of life available to us, the one shaped by our upbringing, our culture, our environment, our past choices. But the truth is far more expansive. There are infinite versions of reality, infinite timelines. And while you're only consciously tuned into one of them at any given moment, others are still available, alive in the field, waiting to be noticed. What we call reality is really just a set of agreements about who we are, what we believe is possible, and how life is supposed to feel. But these agreements aren't fixed. They're not laws of nature, they're patterns of attention. And if the life you're in no longer feels aligned, that misalignment is not failure, it's feedback. You haven't done anything wrong. You haven't missed your shot. You're not being punished. You're simply tuned to a timeline that doesn't match your current frequency anymore. And the discomfort is there to alert you, not shame you. The truth is, many people stay in the wrong version of reality for years, even decades, because they've mistaken familiarity for alignment. They confuse external achievement with inner peace. They accept feeling meh as a normal part of adulthood. But if you've started feeling like something's missing, even if everything looks okay on paper, that feeling is not random. It's an invitation. You were not meant to live a life that just works. You were meant to live a life that fits. And the reason you're starting to feel the gap is because part of you already senses the alternative. Maybe you've caught glimpses of it, in moments of daydream, in flashes of clarity, in quiet emotions that surface when you imagine something more. Those moments are more than imagination. They're moments of contact. Moments when you brush against a different timeline. One where the choices feel lighter, where the emotions feel more stable, where the self you bring to the world actually feels like you. The version of life you're currently in might have been right for a different version of you, one with different values, needs, fears, or expectations. But if your deepest desires have changed, if your inner vision is shifting, that's not a crisis. That's growth. It means your inner world is evolving, and the outer world simply hasn't caught up yet. And that's okay. Most people ignore these signals. They chalk them up to fantasy or mood swings. They learn to shut them down because they don't align with what's practical. But if you're here, still reading, still resonating, then chances are you've stopped doing that. You've started paying attention. You've begun to admit, if only to yourself, that something needs to change. That this version of life, however functional, is not the one you're here to settle for. And that knowing can feel both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because you don't yet know what the shift will look like. Liberating because something inside you is finally being acknowledged. You're not behind. You're not failing. You're awakening. The sense that you're living in the wrong reality doesn't mean your whole life is a mistake. It just means that your consciousness is evolving, that your preferences are changing, that your energy is outgrowing the container it's been operating in. And when that happens, things stop feeling smooth. You stop being able to force yourself into old roles, routines, and beliefs, not because you've lost discipline, but because you've gained awareness. You begin to see through things. Patterns you used to tolerate become intolerable. Conversations you used to entertain start draining you. Goals you used to chase start feeling meaningless. This is not apathy, it's clarity. And clarity is the beginning of transition. This moment, the one where you question whether the life you're living is the right one, is not a breakdown, it's a doorway. And the discomfort you feel isn't proof that you failed. It's proof that you're waking up to something more. You may not know yet what that something more looks like. That's okay. It's not your job to map the entire future. It's your job to listen to what doesn't feel true anymore and trust that the next version of life will start to reveal itself as you make space for it. We've been conditioned to override our inner signals, to dismiss our emotions, to keep things running even when the engine is sputtering. But real alignment doesn't come from pushing harder. It comes from being honest. And honesty starts here, with the simple admission that this might not be the reality that reflects your true self anymore. You're not stuck, you're just tuned in. And that tuning, that growing sense of disconnection from a life that no longer fits, is not a mistake. It's the moment where the shift begins. Stay with it, let it speak, let it guide you, because the life that's meant for you is not a fantasy. It's already real, you just haven't aligned with it yet. But that changes the moment you stop pretending this version is enough. You are shifting timelines far more often than you think. Not just during big life transitions or dramatic moments of change, but every moment, every thought, every emotion, every belief is casting its vote for the version of reality you're about to step into next. It's easy to think of life as one fixed stream, a single narrative you're moving through from birth to death with some twists and turns along the way. But what we call life is more like a frequency, and you're tuning into different stations constantly, whether you're aware of it or not. Each timeline isn't something you arrive at, it's something you select, moment by moment, through your state of being. That means the person you are when you wake up in the morning, the thoughts you think, the emotions you sit in, the assumptions you carry, they're not just shaping your day, they're shaping your entire reality. You're not waking up into a neutral world. You're waking up into a version of the world that reflects your current frequency. And if your internal state shifts, the world begins to rearrange itself around that new setting. This is not metaphor. This is how reality works on a quantum level. You don't need to understand particle physics to grasp the essence of it. Consciousness is not a passenger in this journey, it's the driver. And the more deliberate you become with your inner world, the more clearly you start to see the shifts reflected in your outer world. Most people are shifting unconsciously. They think their life is moving in a straight line, when in fact they're bouncing between timelines all the time. Pulled by reactive thoughts, old programming, emotional loops, and belief systems that don't even belong to them. They're not stuck. They're just not aware that they're the ones holding the dial. The important thing is recognizing how these micro shifts work. Every belief you reinforce, every assumption you accept, every story you repeat, these are the mechanisms through which timelines are selected and reinforced. If you keep telling yourself that life is hard, people can't be trusted, or things never work out for you, you are energetically aligning with a version of reality where those beliefs are true. That's not punishment. That's coherence. The universe reflects what you are, not what you wish for. This is why desire alone isn't enough. You can want a better life with all your heart, but if your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs contradict that desire, you won't shift into it. Not because it's not available, but because your frequency isn't tuned to receive it. Wanting is passive. Alignment is the mechanism. but the how of that alignment is the focus of your next phase. For now, it's about seeing clearly that this isn't something mystical or random. You are not stuck in a single version of life. Every time you experience a surge of emotion, every time you dwell on a belief, every time you respond to a situation from a certain mindset, you're selecting a parallel version of the world. Most people assume they're shifting when they finally make a big external change. A new job, a new relationship, a new city. But those are reflections. By the time those outer events unfold, the internal shift has already been happening. What changed was the frequency of your awareness, not just your location or circumstances. This is the real power behind moment-to-moment awareness, not control, but recognition. When you begin to notice your internal shifts in real time, you can start to sense how quickly your reality moves with you. Patterns start to dissolve. Synchronicities increase. Life starts to respond with more accuracy, more speed, more clarity. And yet this power can only become usable if you understand that shifting is not a rare spiritual event. It's a natural function of being conscious. Whether you're paying attention or not, it's happening. But once you bring your attention to the process, you gain agency. You start to choose. You start to redirect. You don't need to jump timelines with grand gestures. The jump happens every time you shift your focus, every time you pivot emotionally. Every time you challenge a limiting belief, you soften the structure of the old timeline, and in its place, a new one begins to stabilize. It's subtle, but it's powerful, and it's always available. You've done it before, more times than you can count, even if you didn't realize that's what was happening. Every time you felt stuck, made an inner shift, and saw something unexpected open up, that was a jump. Every time you chose not to repeat an old pattern, even if only for a moment, that was a jump. Every time you started seeing the same numbers, hearing the right words, noticing the perfect opportunity just as your mood changed, that was evidence. You've already been doing this. Now you're just learning how to do it consciously. Next segment, we will show you what comes next. How to stabilize the shift through clarity, emotional resonance, and self-honest alignment. But for now, stay here, with the awareness that you are not waiting for the shift. You are the shift. You don't have to keep living in a version of reality that doesn't reflect who you really are. You have the ability right now to begin aligning with a timeline that actually matches your values, your vision, and the frequency of the life you know deep down is possible. But alignment isn't something you stumble into. It's something you choose, something you stabilize through honesty, self-awareness, and energetic precision. Choosing the right reality starts with one simple but confronting question. What kind of life actually feels like me? Not the life that earns praise, not the life that fits the mold, not the life that checks the boxes, the one that makes sense to your body, the one that feels like breathing instead of performing, the one that doesn't require you to trade authenticity for acceptance. You begin shifting into that life by listening to what already resonates, the thoughts, ideas, and visions that bring a sense of clarity and relief, the ones that make your nervous system relax. The ones that don't just excite your mind, but fulfills your energy. That's your signal. That's alignment. The reason this step matters is because clarity is a filter. Without it, you'll keep reacting to life instead of selecting it. You'll stay in cycles of frustration, endlessly trying to manifest your desires while simultaneously embodying a frequency that repels them. But when you get clear on the version of life that actually feels like you, everything begins to recalibrate. So start here. Describe the version of reality you want to live, not just in terms of external outcomes, but internal atmosphere. What does it feel like to live in that timeline? How do you carry yourself? How do you make decisions? What kinds of thoughts feel natural? What kind of people feel magnetic? Then take it one step further. What does that version of you believe is normal? What do they believe is safe? What do they expect as their default? Because this is where you begin to shift. You don't shift by repeating affirmations you don't believe. You shift by identifying the beliefs that are already congruent with the version of life you're ready to embody and reinforcing them. You shift by feeling the emotional signature of your desired reality and learning to stabilize it in your body. Not as a trick, not as a performance, as your baseline. And yes, this takes practice. Because right now, your nervous system may still be wired to the old version of you. The one who expects struggle, the one who protects against disappointment, the one who believes that joy must be earned. You can't force that part of you to disappear, but you can stop letting it drive. Start choosing differently, not all at once, but moment by moment. Choose thoughts that feel more like truth than fear. Choose behaviors that mirror where you're going instead of where you've been. Choose stillness when the old timeline wants you to panic. Choose alignment over approval. Choose coherence over performance. You don't need to change your whole life overnight. You just need to interrupt the pattern of embodying a version of you that no longer feels real. Every time you pause and ask, does this reflect the life I'm aligning with? You're practicing conscious timeline selection. You're no longer reacting. You're choosing. This is what people mean when they talk about energetic alignment. It's not about perfection. It's about consistency. About showing up as someone who no longer negotiates with the parts of their life that don't reflect their values. About trusting that the version of you who already lives your dream isn't far away. They're just waiting for you to stop abandoning yourself. You know you're beginning to shift when your old reality starts to lose its grip. Not because it disappears, but because it no longer feels like yours. You stop needing to justify your desires. You stop trying to convince yourself to settle. You stop looking for signs that it's okay to want more. And instead, you just begin. Begin walking differently. Begin speaking differently. Begin thinking in ways that support your vision instead of contradicting it. Begin showing up in small but powerful ways that declare, I'm no longer living by the rules of the old timeline. Let your habits become votes. Let your posture become a declaration. Let your silence in misaligned spaces become a boundary. You don't need to convince anyone. You just need to become someone who no longer entertains what doesn't resonate. When people talk about quantum leaps, this is what they mean. Not skipping the work, but collapsing the timeline between who you've been and who you actually are, by removing everything that separates the two. That gap closes through clarity, emotional resonance, and behavior, and most importantly, through feeling. If you want to shift into a new reality, the single most powerful thing you can do is feel as if it's already true. Not as a fantasy, not as a game, but as a real grounded state of being. Because when your nervous system begins to accept the emotions of your desired life as normal, your reality starts catching up. This is where you stop pretending. This is where you stop hoping. This is where you start living the shift before the world mirrors it back. You'll know you're on the right path, not because everything becomes easy, but because it starts feeling aligned, even when it's challenging. You'll feel an inner click. A sense of calm resolve, the absence of performance, the presence of power. You don't need to explain your shift to anyone. You don't need to justify it to yourself. All you need to do is respond. Every time your old patterns try to pull you back into survival, you get to respond differently. Every time the world tests your new alignment, you get to remember who you're choosing to be. And if you fall out of alignment, you return, not through guilt, through awareness, through kindness, through the quiet decision to come back into the vibration of what feels real, because this is your real power, the ability to return, to remember, to realign. And if you do this enough, if you reinforce this state of being as your new normal, reality has no choice but to reorganize around it. You are not here to wait for permission. You are not here to hope your future finds you. You are here to become the version of you who's already living it. That's how you collapse the distance between desire and embodiment. That's how you shift. And that's how you finally start living in the timeline that was made for you all along. You've come all this way because a part of you already knows this truth. You didn't need to be convinced, you needed to be reminded. The version of you that resonates with this message is the one already living closer to the life you know is possible. So let this moment be a turning point. Let this message be your confirmation. You are not behind, you are not too late, and you are not imagining the life you want. You're remembering it, because the life you desire is not a distant possibility. It is an available frequency, and you've already started to tune in. Now it's time to respond, not by forcing a transformation, but by softening into truth, by no longer negotiating with the outdated version of yourself, by saying yes, fully, to the path that reflects your wholeness. Reality won't shift all at once, but it will shift undeniably. Not through magic, through alignment, through the consistent, grounded practice of honoring what feels real. So ask yourself right now, what does alignment feel like in your body? What version of you feels the most alive? What's one small way you can start living from that today? Let your answer be your permission. Let your action be your portal. Let your clarity be your anchor. And if you feel called, share your aligned reality in the comments. Speak it into the world. Witness yourself claiming it. Let this be a space where intention becomes momentum. The shift has already begun. Now it's your turn to step in fully and live it.